So I know we want to talk about substances and sleep because I feel like there is this common understanding that wine helps you fall asleep and it's great for sleep, but it's actually not great for sleep. And I think a lot of people don't understand how alcohol and caffeine can affect their sleep when you drink it and what your body does with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wine does help you fall asleep. That's not the problem. So there are three substances that you really want to be careful with and ideally just avoid altogether near the time when you sleep. Before I get into what they are and what they do, I'll explain a little bit about the reason why. Sleep is not just about quantity. We usually talk about sleep in terms of quantity, like how long did you sleep? Because it's easier because
Mhm.
it's easy to measure. You know how long you slept last night, more or less. But sleep quality also plays a role in how restful and restorative the sleep was and how well you function the next day. We don't talk about that as much because it's harder to measure. Um, I know there's a lot of consumer devices that claim to measure sleep quality, smartwatches and stuff like that. The general consensus is that those things are maybe not super accurate. We can talk more about that later. But the main point I want everyone to kind of understand now is it's not just how long you sleep, it's also how well you sleep. And some of the substances that actually may help you fall asleep negatively impact your sleep quality. And your sleep quality is the progression through the various stages of sleep. Um, when you first fall asleep, you're in this very light stage of sleep. And then what happens is you kind of go like this. So this is waking up, right? So you get to these very light stages of sleep where you're almost awake, and then you go through these deeper stages. And ideally, you go through that cycle about 4 or 5 times in a night. And realistically speaking, it's not the number of hours that you sleep, but actually how many sleep cycles you complete that helps you feel rested and alert and ready the next day. And it's only roughly correlated with how long you're actually asleep. Alcohol does assist with sleep initiation. It kind of shuts your brain off a little bit. It can calm your anxious thoughts and it makes you tired. I mean, it physically makes you a little bit more fatigued. So it can aid in sleep initiation. But the downside is that it negatively impacts your ability to reach the deeper stages of sleep. And so you may not really complete any sleep cycles if you fall asleep somewhat, even if you're just a little buzzed. I'm not even talking about being drunk per se. Even a small amount of alcohol negatively impacts your progression through the sleep cycles. And if you really pay attention, you probably notice that because on days when you had a glass of wine or two to help you fall asleep, you probably notice you did fall asleep fairly quickly and fairly easily. But do you really feel good the next day? I think typically we don't, and not just because you might still you might have sort of a mini hangover. But if you really pay attention to it, like if you really track it, I think you'll find that those days, and I know for some people that's every day, so there's no basis for comparison, but you really aren't your best on those days. And even if you get less sleep without using alcohol to fall asleep, the improvements in sleep quality that you can achieve will still probably make up for it. So
Well,
that's,
well,
yeah,
I was
go
going
ahead.
to ask you because I have noticed that I don't dream when I drink alcohol, or I don't remember my dreams. And I normally remember a lot of my dreams, or that at least I did it. And I was looking into that and realized that it really does cut into your REM sleep as
Right.
well. And I had no idea the importance of REM sleep on your memory and creativity and what that does for your brain.
Yeah. And caffeine is basically the same way. Now, caffeine, of course, does not help you fall asleep. Although there are a lot of people that say that caffeine does not impair their ability to fall asleep. I work with people who say, like, I can drink a cup of coffee or a Mountain Dew or whatever an hour before bed, and I fall asleep just fine. And that probably legitimately is true for some people. I don't necessarily doubt that. But like alcohol, caffeine also affects your sleep quality. So even just because you're able to fall asleep after drinking caffeine doesn't mean there's no harm in it for your sleep quality. Because it's a stimulant, it still impairs your ability to reach those deeper stages of sleep. And again, even if the quantity of sleep you get is not compromised by caffeine intake, quality is. So those are kind of the two obvious ones, but I mentioned there's three.
Mhm.
The third substance that you want to be really careful about as it relates to sleep is Benadryl or anything containing an antihistamine, because those make you extremely drowsy, like probably more so than alcohol. And a lot of people use Benadryl, or even some of the products, some over the counter products that say they are for sleep explicitly. I can't think of any names off the top of my head, but there are some, use an antihistamine as their sleep inducing active ingredient. They work, again, it's kind of the same thing. Sure, it helps you fall asleep, but it really, honestly, more so than alcohol or caffeine, antihistamines significantly reduce your sleep quality to the extent that it's as if you slept about half as much as you actually did. So
Really?
8 hours, yeah, so 8 hours of sleep that's induced by an antihistamine is comparable to 4 hours of natural sleep in terms of your cognitive performance the next day. So unless you would like literally not sleep without it, it's probably not worth it. And this is a little bit scary, I know, as someone who's taken a lot of Benadryl because I have allergies.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, I have horrible allergies, so I do sometimes have to take it just like to complete my day and not be miserable. But excessive use of Benadryl, or I shouldn't just say Benadryl, it's any antihistamine, when you are not actually congested. So if you're actually congested, it's a different story. You're supposed to take it, right? But if you're using it like explicitly for sleep and you're not experiencing allergies or cold symptoms or congestion, there is some early but pretty compelling evidence that it is a risk factor for early onset dementia.
Wow.
Because it works. Some of this is a little bit beyond me, but the mechanism of action of these antihistamines is to dry you up, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why your nose suddenly stops running and you can sleep without blowing your nose every 2 minutes, which is nice. But if there's nothing to dry up, it apparently can have an effect on brain fluid. It's kind of terrifying, I know, but this is something that's kind of come out in the last few years. And so I am very, very antihistamines for sleep initiation purposes, unless you're just having horrible allergies and you would not be able to sleep otherwise because your nose is running nonstop. And I empathize with that because that does happen to me sometimes.
So would you recommend using like a Claritin that's non-drowsy so that you're not risking your brain?
Well, again, if you actually are having congestion or allergies, my understanding is that then it's safe to take it. Okay. Because then it's just drying up your sinuses. You shouldn't take it when you aren't having any actual problem with that. You shouldn't take it just because you need help falling asleep. That's considered like abuse of it, basically, and that's when it becomes a risk factor, when you're not using it for allergies.
I'm really glad I have not given my toddler any baby Benadryl to make him go to sleep now.
Yeah. And this is more like chronic use. Like if you did it once or twice, I don't think there's any harm in that. But there are people out there who are taking antihistamines like every night to fall asleep. I've even heard that some doctors recommend this rather than prescription sleep medications. And that's when it really becomes a concern, is when it's like every day or 3 or 4 days a week. That's really probably not good.